Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky, and welcome to the special Yom Kippur episode of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Put on my Yom Kippur tie, special for the occasion. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch or listen to your podcast, as always, we are excited to be able to have you along for the experience. And we have our last sponsor. We're out of sponsorships. So I guess that's appropriate as we come to the end of the 6th year of the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. I hope we have sponsors so we can have a 7th year. But that's really up to you. I'm reaching out to my listening audience once again as we are down to the crunch time. So we really need your help in order to be able to keep this going. I know there are a lot of people who gain tremendously from this, and I know everybody is waiting for somebody else to step up to the bat, but now it is your turn. So we're looking forward to seeing you. Just go to the website, RabbiOrlofsky.com, and go to sponsor an episode, and you can do it in honor, you can do it in memory, you can do it anything that you want. You can do it anonymously, you can list a bunch of names, you can push your business, whatever it is that you want. But we need your help. But a special sponsor for this week. Hi, Rabbi Orlofsky. I wanted to help sponsor, as I love having your podcast as a lighthearted, easy way of listening to Torah content as a supplement to my learning in yeshiva. Listen, that's what we're doing here. You know, we're providing Torah in an entertaining, interesting, and exciting way. So please, everybody, I'm glad this person is inspired, and he should be able to inspire more. Sponsored for the Zechus of my Shalom Bayis, Mitztaer Hashem, as well as me finding the right place to continue my learning next Zman. Very important. I'm a 28-year-old Baal Tshuva from Westchester, New York, and I've been learning at Aish for the past 6+ years. Baruch Hashem, I progressed very much in my learning. However, along the lines of what you have always spoke out in ways the yeshiva system can improve, that's so nice that you put it that way, as opposed to, since you're always trashing everybody and everything. This is the Yom Kippur episode. We certainly don't want to make it sound like I'm a negative person, because I hate people who are negative, yeah? I'm looking for a slower place to be able to stimulate my own learning of the Gemara and Rishonim rather than constantly feeling like trying to keep up with how the rabbi is teaching his shiur. I need help in navigating this, as well as trying to find a more balanced approach in my learning. I would love to hear more hashkafa and chumash in my learning, but keep being pushed to go deeper and deeper in Ian in order to really taste the sweetness of learning. Would love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for all that you do. So you're making a very important point. And the Mesilas Yesharim, in his introduction, when he talks about shleimus means completion. And he darshans the psukim in Devarim, and points out that there are 5 areas of avodas Hashem to become a shalom. There's avas Hashem, there's yiras Hashem, there's kavanas halev, there's halicha b'drachav, to emulate God's midos, and there's shmiras kol ha-mitzvahs kulai. And he says everybody puts an emphasis on the last one, but that's only one of the 5 areas of avodas Hashem. And he says it is kedai to sacrifice one for the other. That was the argument between the Muslim movement and Rav Chaim Brisker, where the Muslim movement felt you have to take time out of your learning to work on your Musar and Midos to improve yourself as a person. And Rav Chaim Brisker felt you can find everything in Torah. And it's not necessary to make special time for it. But the fact of the matter is that most of us are not on that level. where we can just be able to sit down and learn a Tosfos and get from that all of our moral development. So we need a more balanced approach. And as I have pointed out on more than one occasion, the model that the yeshivas use were developed in Europe, more or less by Chaim Volozhina, and that was the system that was set up. Times have changed, and when times change, the methods used have to be changed. The Gemara says that parents always educated their own children. Shinantim levanecha. That was the normal way you learned Torah at home. And when the situation changed, they couldn't do that anymore. They started an educational system. They had to, because people weren't, either parents didn't have the ability or the time to be able to teach their children properly. And so they set up a school system. Not because the Torah changed, but because times changed. And girls, of course, stayed at home with their mothers. And whom a mother teach to mend and tend and fix, preparing us to marry whoever father picks. The daughters. So daughters stayed home and they helped their mothers. When the situation changed and girls started going off to school, they only had secular schools. A lot of girls were being lost. They were going off the derech. So a seamstress in Krakow by the name of Sarah Schneer saw this was a problem and started girls' education. Not because the Torah changed, but because the situation changed. So has anyone actually sat down to really examine whether or not the educational system we have today is the best one? Now, the idea of learning Be'iyun to be able to get fulfillment is, of course, true, right? It's the genius of Torah, the intellectual challenge of Torah. It sharpens your mind. It helps you understand things on a greater level. But, of course, especially a person who's coming in from the outside, who didn't maybe grow up with Torah as the lingua franca of the Jewish people, by which I mean Jews grew up using terms of Torah to communicate. So if you're a regular American, assuming that you have any sense of American tradition in you, when you want to talk about somebody very big, you talk about Paul Bunyan. Paul Bunyan was this giant in American mythology with his blue ox babe, and all the different legends that were that. You would say, wow, he's as big as Paul Bunyan, or some other giant that you might bring in. But if you grew up, in a from Torah environment, you talk about Og Melech HaBashan, as the tape when Zadie was young. So the guy came in, he looked like Og Melech HaBashan's younger brother. That everyone knew what he meant, because those are the terms, When you want to say, spell it out in black and white, give all the details in English. In Jewish talk, it's Rachel Bitcha Ketana, which Rashi explains was how Yaakov tried to explain everything. So these are things that, again, you get with experience, you pick up. But it's good to have more of a breadth of knowledge. There's an old joke about a guy who, this is how old this joke goes. I don't know if these things still apply. He quoted a pasuk in Nach. And someone says, "Oh, you know a pasuk in Nach?" He says, "Well, no, it's a Gemara in Sota." He goes, "Oh, you learned Sota?" He says, "No, Tosfos in the Masechta brings it down." He goes, "Oh, you saw the Tosfos?" He goes, "No, the Beis Lachem Yehuda mentions it," which is like a cheat book. It sums everything up. So the fact that people don't know foundations of Tanakh, there are schools today that follow what they call the Maharal method, which is based on the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that says Chomesh lemikra, Esa lemishnah, Chomesh Esrei legemara. And there are schools that do that. From 5 to 10, they teach the kids all of Tanakh, and the kids learn Tanakh. Then from 10 to 15, they only learn Mishnayos. And then they start Gemara at 15, and they have a foundation of all of Mishnayos and all of Tanakh behind their belt, so they go in much more successful. Others maintain, you don't have to, you learn Gemara, everything's in Gemara. So that might be true, but if you're going to go very slowly and go very in depth, you're not going to see most of Shas. And people who may not normally have any shaykhs to Daf Yomi, that's one of the advantages of Daf Yomi, is that it at least means that you'll have seen Shas. Whether you understand it or not is another problem. But at least you'll have seen it. You have gone through all of Shas. And there's definitely an advantage to that. I started doing Daf Yomi 3 cycles ago because they asked me to speak at a Daf Yomi Siyum. And I said, I don't feel comfortable because I don't learn Daf Yomi. They said, nobody who speaks, does Daf Yomi. Rabbi Franz said it best when he said, when your friend's having a simcha, so you come and participate. But to me, it would seem hypocritical to go in there and make a whole speech about how wonderful Daf Yomi is if I don't learn it. So I set up a chavrusa. I said, I'm going to start learning Daf Yomi. And more people joined our little chavrusa shaft. Eventually it turned into a shir. And my chavrusa was giving the shir, and then he got an actual job, something that I don't have anymore. And so Mamela took over the shir, and so I still have a shir in Daf Yomi, and then I started doing one online. And I'm now in my 3rd cycle. So I'm getting a better idea of it. But unless you're exposed to Shas, you don't see all of these concepts and all of these different ideas. So you're 100% right that there are certain Rebbeim who give shir for themselves, not for the guys. Right? A famous story about this education consultant who was meeting with the teachers in a school and says, say your name and what you teach. So my name is so-and-so, I teach history. My name is so-and-so, I teach geometry. My name is so-and-so, I teach biology. My name is so-and-so, I teach English. When he finished, he says, I got to say, nobody gave the right answer. The answer is, I teach children. I teach students. I'm not teaching a subject, I'm teaching the person. And that makes all the difference in the world. When I was in Discovery, you mentioned Eshet Torah, when I was teaching in Eshet Torah. So Ari Khan, I was on the question and answer panel. And Ari Khan said to me, don't answer the question, answer the questioner. See who the person is asking the question and figure out where they're coming from and why they're asking this question and what they want to know. And that, of course, makes a big difference if you can understand the question and where it's coming from. So it's important to understand where the person's coming from and how to be able to answer the question. So if you have a Rebbe who's giving a shir, and I know there are Rebbeim like that. A friend of mine, his son was in 8th grade, and 8th grade is very important because now you're going to determine which high school, or here in Israel, Yeshiva Katana, you get into. And he said to him, the kids couldn't understand what the Rebbe was saying. He was way over everybody's head. And the Rebbe says, I'm not here for the kids. I'm here to say over my Rebbe's Torah. And those who understand it, understand it. And those who don't, though. Terrible approach. Terrible approach. You teach the student who's in front of you. Right? Rav Preda had a student, he had to repeat everything 400 times till the guy chopped it, So he didn't just say, well, I'm saying it over. If you get it, you get it. You don't, you don't. But, you got to make sure that you have a Rebbe who is concerned about making sure that everybody understands what they're saying, as opposed to just teaching the information, just speaking. Otherwise, who needs it? I've often felt that about certain rebbeim who they're just saying over their shir. They're not concerned about the Talmidim. And I said, so I don't even know why you're giving shir. Just write a sefer, put it out, let anybody read it. I don't know what you're gaining. When I was in Chavetz Chaim, it was very dynamic. The Rashiva, Rav Henoch, wanted people to ask questions and to argue and participate, which they did. And when the Rashiva Shir got to be too large, he had to have odd and even days. Everybody was assigned a number. You could only ask questions on odd or even days because it was just becoming such a balagan. And that's the process was very dynamic, asking questions and getting answers. So where you are and what you should be looking for, I guess a lot of that depends. I'm not sure where you're located geographically, but hopefully we can connect and I can give you my 2 cents. I'm not up on what's going on. You understand? I haven't been teaching in yeshiva in years, but at least based on what I know, I can try to share some insights. Okay. Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur. Yom HaSlicha. There's a historical underpinning to Yom Kippur. And that is, of course, that Moshe Rabbeinu went up on Shavuos to get the Luchos, came down on Shavuos B'Tammuz, found that we had built a golden calf and smashed those Luchos. And he goes back up to try to get forgiveness for the Jewish people. Whether it was the 18th or 19th, Machlekes Rashi and Ramban. But he goes back up for 40 days and 40 nights again, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu agrees to forgive the Jewish people. But, lo shachanti b'soicham, I will no longer dwell among them. That boat has sailed. I'm not going to do that anymore. So the people say we cannot live with that distance. We want things back the way they were. So on Rosh Chodesh Elul, Moshe Rabbeinu goes up for another 40 days and comes down with the new Luchos on Yom Kippur. And that's when the Jewish people are, in fact, realize they have been forgiven. They've gotten back what they are. And this becomes a day of Slicha and Mechila for all time. So it would seem as if this is a historical day of Slicha Mechila. The problem is, and I've mentioned this in the past, the Psikta de Rav Kahana, who says, if it hadn't been for the Egel, then the months of the Egel would have had Yomim Tovim just like every other month. But Tammuz, Av, and Elul, which were the months of the Egel, all of those Yom Tovim were pushed into Tishrei. So Moshe Shapiro explained what that means. That Rosh Hashanah would have come out in Tammuz, Yom Kippur would have come out in Av, Sukkot would have come out in Elul, and only Shmini Atzeres would have been in Tishrei. And it would have been Atzeres, just like Shavuos is called Atzeres. From Sukkot to Shmini Atzeres, you would have counted 7 weeks till you came to Shmini Atzeres. And then it would have been an Atzeres the same way. Now, of course, everything is more compact. And so every day of Sukkot is a week of Sfiras HaOmer that we have to pack everything into in a much more intense situation. But what does that mean? Rosh Hashanah would come out in Tammuz. Sai, according to Rabbi Yeshua, who says the world was created on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Sai, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says the world was created on Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. What does that mean that the world would have been created in Tammuz? How could Rosh Hashanah have been in Tammuz? And the answer is, if we would have gotten those first Luchos, it would have been a different world. And if it's a different world, then you understand it's a whole different situation. It's a new beginning. It's a new world. Yeah, you'd start over again. And then the way Reb Moshe put it is like this, and I'm trying to say it over as best as I can. I always try to be careful. Reb Moshe was not the one who coined it, but he did say it. I don't mind if you say over what I say in your name. Just don't say over what you say in my name. So I'm trying to say it correctly. The nature of people are that they're always going to do things wrong. And therefore, we always need a Yom Slicha v'Kapara. Whether we built the Egel or not, there would have had to have been a Yom Kippur built into the year. And so whether it came out in Av or whether it came out historically in Tishrei wouldn't have made a difference. There had to have been a Yom Slicha Mechila. And that's what I want to try to talk about today. Because, one of the central aspects of Yom Kippur are the Yud Gimel Midos. You say them over and over again. And of course, when you reach Ne'ilah, after every Slicha, and Ne'ilah is basically the best of Slichos, all of the Slichos that you said during the week of Slichos, you're picking out the key ones, and then you're doing Kel Melech Elyon afterwards, followed by the Yud Gimel Midos. That's the normal way of doing it. By the way, apparently, somebody wrote in and said that when I did my podcast on about Slichos, I mentioned saying Slichos at night when he says, well, I always try to say it in the morning because of Hashmeres Haboka. Correct. I do too. So if I said you say it at night, I clearly misspoke. You can say it at night, but it's better to say it by Hashmeres Haboka. He is correct. Anyway, Slichos, which is setting us up for Yom Kippur, bringing us to Yom Kippur. Again, the highlight of it is the Yud Gimel Midos. And that is, of course, Yom Kippur over and over again. When I was growing up, we used to sing the Yud Gimel Midos. Hashem, Hashem, Kerachum v'chanun, right? And when you reach Ne'ilah, forget about it. There's just not enough time to sing that over and over again. There's barely enough time to say it over and over again. Particularly here in Eretz Yisrael, because at the end of Ne'ilah, you have to have Birchas Kahanim. And since Birchas Kahanim is a Voda, you have to do it before Shkia. And so it's... you have to rush. You have to mamish rush to be able to get it in. But, and then you're left with this big period of time at the end. So they tend to do every Avinu Malkeinu responsively, the whole thing, and slowly to try to drag it out. But the Yud Gimel Midos is the highlight. Interestingly enough, Rosh Hashanah, we do not say the Yud Gimel Midos, because Rosh Hashanah is the Yom Adin, not a day of Slicha and Kapara. So Slichos, we're asking for forgiveness. Yom Kippur, we're asking for forgiveness. Rosh Hashanah, we're being judged. Now is not the time to do Slichos on Rosh Hashanah. So people will point out, when they open the Aron, they say the Yud Gimel Midos. So Rav Moshe explained, that's not the Yud Gimel Midos. If you look at the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu was misatef with a talus, wrapped himself in a talus like a shliach tzibur. And he said the Yud Gimel Midos. And the Yud Gimel Midos are V'yavo Hashem al panav vayikra. And then you do the Yud Gimel Midos. But you can't do the just saying the Yud Gimel Midos by themselves is not the Seder. You have to say the Seder of the Yud Gimel Midos. And that's what Yom Kippur is filled with. Saying the Yud Gimel Midos over and over again. So it has a certain highlight to it. It's unusual, the Yud Gimel Midos, in that you repeat Hashem's name twice. And Rav Moshe Shapiro said, you will not find a Kadosh Baruch Hu saying a pasuk with Hashem's name twice. So people pulled out a few, and he says, you see that there's a break in between. It's like, it's like there's a comma. I'm not talking about that. But we actually say Hashem, Hashem. We just say Hashem's name twice. Yeah. So Yud Gimel Midos, it says if you say the Yud Gimel Midos, you will be forgiven. Of course, it's not that easy. Yud Gimel Midos means that not that you say it, but that you become it. And that's what I mentioned, one of the 5 areas of Avodas Hashem, Halich B'drachav, means Mahu Chanan V'rachum, Afator Chanan V'rachum. So when you say Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'chanun, Erech Apayim V'rav Chesed V'emes, you have to encapsulate those midos. And you have to learn how to emulate them the way a Kadosh Baruch Hu does, and to do that chesed and to have that mercy and all the other attributes that are being described over here in the Yud Gimel Midos. But we start right away with Hashem, Hashem. What's the repetition there? So the Mefarshim explain. Hashem, Hashem, Hashem before you've ever done anything wrong, and Hashem after you've done a chait. That's an amazing concept. I have to ask for Hashem's help when I haven't done anything wrong yet, for his forgiveness. This is an important point to realize. The very fact that you are a physical being means by definition you are chaser. You are incomplete. And there's no way for you to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu completely. You just can't. You have to sleep. You have to eat. To go to the bathroom. You have to, there are things that you need to take care of. And besides that, just your physical limitations. You're weak. Can't do everything. And I remember this woman told me, because I don't know what to do about my husband. He went to a shir about how you're supposed to be mama'ed b'shena, and he's trying not to sleep. And he just keeps passing out, And I'm afraid he's going to be driving and just, pass out and crash, He can't go without sleep. The Vilna Gaon only slept 2 hours a night, 4 half-hour intervals. So it was a shenis arai. And there were people who tried to copy him. One of his Talmidim tried to copy him. And he said to him, I can do this because I'm strong. You're not. Certain people, normal people, need sleep. Lahavdil, Thomas Edison, also slept very little. Didn't need it. Parents are often stymied when they have a kid who just doesn't sleep, doesn't need so much sleep. And so, gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning. He's up for the day. He had a few hours of sleep, and that was enough for him. So they have to figure out ways to try to keep himself busy, without waking up everybody else in the house. But some people don't need that, but other people do. The Rambam says you need 8 hours of sleep. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says 6 hours of sleep. Rav Gans tells the story how for his son's bar mitzvah, he took him to the stipler to get a bracha, that he should be a Talmid Chacham. He says, fine, I'll give you a bracha, but how are you going to become a Talmid Chacham? What's your plan? Kid didn't know what to answer. Oh, I don't understand. He says, there are 24 hours in a day. You need to sleep for 8 hours, or 7 hours and take a nap during the day for an hour. And you need 3 hours to daven. You need 3 hours for eating and bathing, going to the bathroom and that, So, fine. That's 6 and 8 is 14. That leaves you with 10 hours a day. It says you learn stark for 10 hours a day. Wait, I may be making a mistake. Maybe it's 2 hours to daven and 2 hours for the meals, etc. That's right. You're left with 12 hours a day. It says you learn 12 hours a day stark from now until you get married, and I guarantee you'll be a Talmid Chacham. You don't need a bracha. I guarantee it'll work. But the thing that he said to him that was interesting is you got to sleep for 8 hours a night or 7 hours and an hour nap. But a person doesn't get enough sleep is not going to be able to function. Yeah. My continuing health saga, it turns out that one of the things I was having is that I was constantly exhausted. I still am, but maybe less so. Always exhausted, and the cardiologist said it's probably sleep apnea. So I got a sleep apnea test. Of course, that makes it sound much simpler than it actually is. My wife had to make a lot of phone calls and wait for a very long time till they give you this little thing to try it out. And I met afterwards with a pulmonologist to discuss the results, and he said, "Well, you only stop breathing 7 times an hour. That's not a lot. Apparently, people with sleep apnea, stop breathing a lot. But when you stop breathing for 30 seconds at a time, and your oxygen saturation drops to 60%. Now, so that you appreciate this, when I had COVID, they send you a little monitor to check your oxygen level. If it goes below 90%, then you have to go to the hospital. So your saturation drops to 60%. When I later met with the doctor who gives out the machines, she said to me, as far as Shabbos goes, you can ask your shayla, just make sure and tell them that for you it's sakonis nefashos if you don't have this. So now I sleep with a CPAP machine. You have a mask on and raw oxygen. I feel like Bane from the Dark Knight, right? He says, it's really weird. But, a person needs to sleep, but without sleep, you're not going to be able to function. But because I need sleep and I need to eat and I need to go to the bathroom and I have all these other physical obligations, you understand that that's going to limit me. That limits me in my avodas Hashem. So before I've done anything wrong, I already have to ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for forgiveness simply by nature of my inherent humanity. And so I've mentioned this in the past, but it is kedai to go over it again, and that is the hardest part of tshuva is recognizing that I've done things wrong. And you have to recognize that. You have to know that. You have to integrate that. And so a person says, I've told this story. I don't remember how long ago I told this story, but the story of Rabbi Yitzchak share, where he sees this bacher and he says, so, it's Eli doing tshuva. He says, yeah, of course, doing tshuva. It's El. He says, for what? He says, for my affairs. He says, like what? He says, well, whatever affairs I have. He says, well, let's go down the line. Avodah Zarah? He says, no. Oh, that's good. Shvichas Damim? You kill anybody? No. Oh, okay, yeah. Gilei Arayos? No. Oh, very good. And he keeps going down the line. And finally, he comes to Lashon Hara. And he says, well, I've spoken Lashon Hara, but it was always for a toelis. It was for a useful purpose. It wasn't. Okay. Bittul Torah? Well, yeah, but it was always with cheshbon. It was like, And after a while, the kid realized he was getting caught. And he says, okay, Pasuk says there's nobody who doesn't sin, Everybody sins. Everybody does things wrong. Isaac looks at him and says, you're never going to do tshuva because you've never done anything wrong. You have excuses for everything. You know, you never killed anybody? Will you mavayish somebody with Ravim? That's called embarrass someone in public. That's called murder. Gilei Arayis, you never looked at a girl? Yeah. Mesil Shem says that's Gilei Arayis. You spoke Lashon Hara, you mavatal Torah, and the only reason you didn't serve Avodah Zarah is because the Anshe Knesset Gedolah were mavatal the taiva for it. Canceled out the desire. Otherwise, you would have been serving Avodah Zarah too. But in your mind, you've never done anything wrong. Hashem, when we start at the beginning, we're saying to ourselves that before I've done anything wrong, I already know that my imperfections and my mumim and all of my limitations guarantee that I'm doing things wrong. When I say doing things wrong, it means I'm not serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way I'm supposed to. So, okay, it's not my fault. That's the answer. That's what this boy was trying to say. It's not my fault. We had a whole podcast where we talked about it's my fault. And the fact of the matter is that as long as you have excuses, you're never going to be able to do tshuva. Shmuel comes to Shaul and says, hello, Shmuel, I did everything Hashem said. He says, you know, it's funny you say that because Hashem came to me last night. Should I tell you what he said? I said, sure. He says, I regret the fact that I made Shaul Melech on Yisrael because he doesn't listen to me. Because I told him to wipe out Amalek and he didn't. Okay, you're Shaul at this point. Shmuel Navi says, God just told me last night that you didn't do what I asked you to do. What should you respond at this point? This is what you don't respond. I don't understand what you're talking about. I did everything Hashem said. If that's what Shaul says. And at that point, Shaul can't do tshuva anymore. That's it. You lost the malchus. He says, okay, I'm sorry. No. If I'm telling you as a Navi that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that you didn't do Ratzon Hashem and that you messed up, and that's not enough of a cue for you to say, uh-oh, what did I do? Shmuel says, Hashem says, didn't I tell you to wipe out all the animals? He says, I did. Okay, the people took some of the better ones because they want to bring them as kabbanos, but otherwise they did everything else. You kept Agag alive. Unbeknownst to you, Agag managed to be with a woman that night and keep the seed of Amalek alive. From that came Haman, who almost wiped out the Jewish people. From that came, according to some Mefarshim, the Nazis, who almost wiped out all of the Jewish people. I didn't do anything wrong. So that's it. There's nothing, I can't help you. I can't help you. Nathan Hanavi comes to Dovid HaMelech and says, can I tell you to judge a case as the king? He says, sure. He says, there was this poor man. He just had this little shepsila, this little sheep. Loved the sheep. Yeah, it would sit on his lap. He would feed it from his table. He would take care of it, do all these wonderful things for it. And this rich man, he had lots of sheep. And even though he was making a suda, he didn't want to waste his sheep. So he stole the poor man's sheep and he shechted it and ate it. And Dovid said, what a rotten guy. For that level of evil, he deserves to be killed. But he either is going to, pay back 5 times because 4 times. You can pay back 4 times because when you steal a sheep from someone and you shechted, you have to pay back 4 sheep. And Nasan Hanavi, in the court of Dovid HaMelech, not in private, swings around and points his finger and says, J'accuse. That man is you, Dovid HaMelech. You're the one. You took Bathsheba and you married her and you took her away and, it's what you did. Now, Mistama, Dovid HaMelech knew the Gemara in Shabbos that says, anyone who says that David is chayte, elatoya. Right? Anyone who says that David did a sin. And he could have said, what are you talking about? First of all, they were only married midrabanan. Second of all, Uriah was married b'malchus. Yeah? Third of all, before you go away to battle, I have everybody give their wife a get. So what are you accusing me of over here? But that's not what Dovid says. He says, Chatasi, and then there's a psik in the middle of the pasuk. The pasuk sort of stops. Rabbi Orlofsky quoted the Gra. I couldn't find this Gra. I asked him once, and he says he didn't remember where it was. But he says, because Dovid knew he should have said, Chatasi avisi porshati, but he couldn't. He was in so much pain, he couldn't get past Chatasi. The Navi told me I did something wrong. What doesn't make what you think at that point? A Navi is telling me I did something wrong. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, this is a day of Slicha Mechila. You think you've never done anything wrong? Trust me. Just by being part of the human experience, your inherent lackings, your inherent limitations mean that you've done things wrong. And when a person recognizes that, there's an old story about this guy who's driving to his Reform temple. And he gets there on Yom Kippur and he says to his friend, he goes, on my way over here, I passed the Orthodox shul. He says, they must be the worst people in the world. They're crying, they're banging their chest. They must have done terrible things. I didn't do anything wrong. What about you? No, I didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. Noach Weinberg from Eshet Torah, he would say, he would do this thing where a new person comes in and they're trying to decide if they should stay and take classes, So he likes to challenge them. So he says, are you a good person or a bad person? And the person always says, I'm a good person. And he says, who's more likely to say they're a good person or a bad person? Of course, a bad person has never done anything wrong. In How to Win Friends and Influence People, in the introduction, it tells a story about some criminal mad dog somebody who had just, shot a cop, and he was hiding out there with his girlfriend, and the police were closing in on him. And he said to her, I can honestly say I've never done anything wrong in my entire life. I don't know why they're coming after me. He was incapable of being honest with himself of what he had done. Years ago, when I used to fly, and they used to have in-flight magazines. I don't know if they still do. But there was an article there by this psychologist who said, I was at my kid's Little League game, and this kid struck out. And he was so angry, he threw the bat. His parents ran over to him to make him feel better. And I said, why did you do that? And they said, because we didn't want to hurt his self-esteem. He says, instead of worrying about his self-esteem, you should be worrying about his underlying morality. Why didn't you say, why'd you throw the bat like that? You could have hurt somebody. And people are worried about people's self-esteem, and it comes, at the expense of basic morality. And he said they did studies of people on death row who had committed such heinous crimes that they were going to be killed. And he said they didn't suffer from low self-esteem. They all have very high self-esteem. They suffer from a lack of morality. And so when we go into Yom Kippur, Hashem, before we've done anything wrong, we understand we have done things wrong. Ba'oines or b'ratzon. Onus means it wasn't even my fault. I'm clapping al chet on oines. Why? Because it means that I've done something to be able to limit HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world, whether I meant to or not, whether that was my intention. I've created limitations in this world by my actions. The mitzvah of Yom Kippur is two things. One are the Inuyim, and the other one is Vidoy, to admit our Averis. That is our avoda of the day. And so a person who's not fasting very well and he has to rest, at least say Vidoy. Say the Vidoy. Say, Elokeinu Kevasenu. Right? What are we going to say? We're not so brazen, Kshay Arif, and so stubborn to say Tzadikim anachnu v'lo chatanu, avo anachnu v'seinu chatanu. Yeah, we've sinned. Take the Dovid Melech approach instead of the Shaul approach, and you'll be able to continue to be a Melech. You'll continue to be able to do great things in this world and for Klal Yisrael. Mitztaer Hashem, everybody should be Zechus to a Gemar Chasim Taiva, and hopefully we will get some more sponsors and be able to continue and start our 7th year together. Looking forward. And that brings us to the question and answer portion of our program. By MK, do you think that it isn't proper to make your sukkah look very fancy and in style because the sukkah is supposed to be a holy place and not a place to do interior design? No, I think it should be as fancy as possible and a place to do interior design because it's a mitzvah. Not only that, it's supposed to be your dira. You're supposed to go and live in the sukkah. And therefore, you're supposed to treat the sukkah like your home. And therefore, there are people who actually move furniture out into the sukkah, as much as possible to make it as fancy and nice as can be. In fact, I remember somebody telling me, he says, I don't put those paper chains up in my sukkah. Would you put them up in your home? Yeah. So the decorations in the sukkah should be the type of decorations that you would want to put up in your own home. So by all means, you should beautify the mitzvah of the sukkah as much as possible. The Gemara says they used to decorate it with flowers and fruits and bottles of wine, and put everything into it. I'm sure I told this story in the past, but you'll indulge me. My father was a florist and was not Shomer Shabbos. He went to Shul Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and we had a Pesach Seder, but most of the other things weren't really there. But Sukkah, he always built a Sukkah. I don't know why. He remembers the Sukkah more than anything else. His father had a Sukkah. And he would make a Sukkah. And my father was a florist. And so he used to build a wooden frame and then nail on trellises. You ever see like in the garden, these these sort of like grids. I don't know how to describe them if you don't know what a trellis is. And then he would bring fresh cedar greens and he would wire it on the inside and the outside. Those were the walls. And then he would put down slats and he would put down cedar greens for the schach. It was beautiful. It smelled beautiful. And it was like something that was alive. And he only allowed real decorations. He put in autumn leaves and Indian corn and gourds and straw flowers. And he would bring from the store potted mum plants, put them around on the outside. And it was the whole thing was a living thing. That's how he made it. And he said, I don't understand these people who get these canvas sukkahs and get these bamboo and put on the top. I said, it's a mitzvah, you're supposed to beautify it. So that's how I grew up. That's my standard of a sukkah. Okay. By Anonymous, why is Mitztaer Patur in a sukkah? Since when is that an excuse? Because the sukkah has to be your dira. And if your house reached the point where it was insufferable, you wouldn't live there. You would move out. And so if your house was suddenly infested with a swarm of yellow jacks, you would get out. if it suddenly got so hot or it was so cold that you couldn't stay there, or assuming your roof was leaking and raining in on you, you'd leave your house. And since the sukkah is supposed to be your house, if you cannot live there the way you would live in a house, then you're patur from there, because the sukkah teishvu shivas yamim, you have to live in it like a house. By Anonymous. Does the Rav do anything to keep your lulav fresh on sukkahs? For example, wet paper towels, etc. I never had a problem with my lulav. Never had a problem with my lulav. Truth be told, I never had a problem with my hadassim either. Both of those made it through sukkahs without any problem. My esrog, I never had a problem with, as long as I never let anybody else touch it, because they invariably broke it, or did something to puzzle it. Yeah. So those things weren't my problem. My problem are my aravos. I've tried different things over the years. I've tried putting my aravos into the refrigerator. I have tried wrapping them in a wet paper towel. What happens is they get moldy when I try to do that. I have not come up with a good method. And I finally came up with what I think is the most successful method. And it's based on a joke I remember from the Carter administration. For those of you who are not familiar with ancient history, then before Biden was Trump, before Trump was Obama, before Obama was George W. Bush, before George W. Bush was Clinton, before Clinton was George Bush Sr., before him was Reagan, before him was Carter. Okay, so it takes you back. And Carter got Menachem Begin to sign the Camp David deal with Egypt, him and Sadat, and he brokered the deal. And the story goes that Menachem Begin was a little nervous, especially after the war in 1956, when we pulled out of Sinai, and then when Nasser decided to move the Egyptian troops back in, he told the UN peacekeeping force to leave, and they said, okay. So he was a little nervous. And Carter said to him, look, you're a biblical Jew. I'm a biblical Christian. It says that the lion will lie down with the lamb. And he takes him to a little pen, and there's a lion and there's a lamb. And they're both lying together. So Begin says, oh, that's truly miraculous. I guess if the lion can lie down with the lamb, we can make peace. And after he leaves, one of the aides says to Jimmy Carter, how did you manage to do that? He says, it's not hard. You have to just keep changing the sheep. So that's the secret I found to keeping fresh aravos. My son-in-law, who goes out and buys my Dalet Minim for me, buys me 3 packages of aravos, which I keep in the refrigerator. And every 2 to 3 days, I just take out my dead aravos and stick in brand new ones. And they look great. That's how I keep my aravos fresh. Just keep replacing the sheep. Do you have any suggestions on how to manage the difficult balancing act of holding the Lulav, Esrog, and Siddur during Hashanah? Well, you can use the method of the person who's usually behind me, because I'm somewhat short. I'm not tiny, but I am short, I think there was a time when I was 5'8", but now I'm 5'7". Maybe I'm shrinking down to 5'6". You get older, you start to shrink. And invariably, there's always somebody behind me who's much taller than me. And invariably, he has the Art Scroll Sukkah Machzor, which is 850 pages, or 1,850 pages. I forget which one. They do a whole separate one. It's enormously thick. And he just rests it on my head as we're going around. So he doesn't have a problem. I, however, have trouble finding people shorter than me. I could try to find a kid, but they move fast. So one year, one of my Talmidot sent me this unbelievable patent. My problem is I almost can never find it before Sukkot. I find it during the year, and then it disappears again, and I always try to find it for Sukkot. The entire Hoshanos are on this card, and the card is held together by Velcro. Mistama, if you're relatively, handy, you could probably make this yourself. You snap it onto your hand, and then you only have to carry your Lulav and Esrog, and you read the Hoshanos on your arm as you're walking around. This is a brilliant patent. I have seen people who've come up with just Hoshanos cards, which are, serve the same purpose. By the way, when you come to Hoshana Rabbah, you turn it inside out and snap it the other way, and now you got all of the Hoshana Rabbah things, and take that along with you. But I will admit that balancing a Lulav and Esrog and a Siddur is problematic. At least to get yourself a Hoshanos card. That is my advice. And that is it for this episode. Until, if you want to find out more about the show, go to my website, RabbiOrlofsky.com. Please sponsor an episode. We need your help. I know it sounds a little nevach to have to keep doing this, but we really need your help if to be able to cover our costs to do the production on this show. You can ask a question, make a comment, send an email, join one of our online shiurim. And that's it for now. Until next time, I am David Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. The Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.